Hello everybody and welcome to today's video, and this is a rather interesting one, quite different to anything I've done in the past. For today, we're going to be crossing over two franchises, one that share a lot in common and have been compared to each other since near the beginning of their existence. You've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail. Today, we're going to be seeing what would happen if we put Sonic into the world of Dragon Ball. Or more specifically, we're going to be taking a look at the characters in Dragon Ball and who I feel like would substitute well as a Sonic character in their place. You could consider this story, as it were, in the same vein as the storybook titles such as Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic and the Black Knight, where we're going to be seeing the Sonic cast in a different story, and they're filling in the roles of pre-existing characters where their own personalities only slightly influence the source material, and for the most part they will be adopting these new personalities. Usually in a storybook setting, Sonic himself remains completely unchanged, but we're not doing that here. In this story, Sonic as well will be changed quite a lot to fit with the source material. Now, we're not going to be going over every excruciating detail, otherwise we would be here all day. So we're going to try and go mostly in chronological order, and I will give my best explanation to a character's choice, and then we'll move on. But every so often, I'll sprinkle in a few plot details of how I think it being a Sonic story would change slightly compared to what was originally done in Dragon Ball. I hope you find this fun and interesting. It's been a lot of fun figuring this out on my end. So let's just jump straight into the chaos. But before we do, I would like to say that if you do end up enjoying this video, please leave a like and subscribe to let me know that this was a success. And if you want to support the video, please share it around to all those who will most definitely disagree with my character selection. But alas, it's time to begin. Like with anything decent, we'll start at the beginning. The original Dragon Ball, before a Saiyan invasion and Super Saiyans were even a thing. In this tale, Goku obviously is going to be Sonic, or if we want to be very specific, classic Sonic, since this is when he was short and young. Likewise, Krillin, Sonic's best friend, is going to be occupied by Tails. These two are pretty much no-brainer picks for the role as the main characters in the classic series and the main characters in OG Dragon Ball. Sonic being Goku, I think, just has to be that way. They are both sort of carefree characters when you get down to the end of it, and really, Sonic is the main character. There are differences, sure, but for the most part, it's a perfect fit. And Krillin as Tails is slightly less good of a fit naturally, since they do begin as rivals, with Krillin especially being antagonistic towards Goku, but they soon learn to get over their differences and end up becoming true best friends. And I don't think there's anyone better suited to the best friend role of Sonic than Tails. Like I said in the intro, they're not going to be perfect one-to-ones here, but this is a pretty good approximation. Of course, the first character that Goku meets is Bulma, which in this story is going to be Amy Rose. And I already know people are going to be up in arms of that choice, but I'll get to why a bit later on. For the surface level things though, Bulma is a very outgoing, driven person, and Amy can be an outgoing and driven person too. The objects of what drive them are slightly different, with Bulma wanting to collect the Dragon Balls specifically, and Amy specifically chasing Sonic. But if you think about it, Bulma's goal in the original Dragon Ball was to collect them so that she could wish for like the perfect boyfriend. So when you remember that part of it, maybe my choice makes a bit more sense than initially thought. Now, speaking of the Dragon Balls, in Sonic Ball, they don't actually exist. There are 7 Dragon Balls, so they are now the 7 Chaos Emeralds. And yes, I know they're not actually the same thing from a mechanical point of view. The Emeralds do different things to the Dragon Balls, but in this story, the Chaos Emeralds are able to grant wishes when you gather all 7 together, and are thus the object of many people's desires. Moving on to the Wolf Bandit of the Waste, we have Yamcha, who plays a big role once again in the original Dragon Ball, and we're going to be making him Antoine from Sonic Sat.AM. Both of them are capable fighters, but also held back by their, let's say, quirky personality traits. And Antoine fits the role quite well of a character that's often played for laughs, but can be depended on in specific moments. Antoine was also known, in Sat.am at least, to be desperately in love with Princess Sally, whereas Yamcha goes through development with his own romantic pursuits throughout the series, so I felt like there were enough parallels here to justify the choice. But Yamcha isn't alone, he travels with his small friend Poi, and so we've given him a small friend of his own in the form of Chip from Sonic Unleashed. They're both small, magical beings. I think it was enough of a connection to make it work. Then we've got Oolong, a transforming pig weirdo guy who, as the series goes on, has less and less to do. I really struggled with this one, and ultimately I've landed on Zor, the depressed Deadly Six member. I'm not completely happy with this choice, but again, Zor's kind of a magical creature and he's really small and no one really likes him. So that's what I went for. But if you have a better suggestion that I don't use later in the video, I'm more welcome for it. Then we've got the Pilaf gang, who are sort of the Team Rocket of Dragon Ball. They're a recurring trio that cause mayhem, try to get in the way of the main cast, but fail every single time. And so we're going to have the leader of the Pilaf gang go from Pilaf himself to Fang the Sniper from the classic era of Sonic. He will be going after the Chaos Emeralds for a purely greedy and self-centered desire. And his henchmen will become Honey the Cat and Bean the Dynamite, both from Sonic the Fighters, who will obey his rule without question, even if they bicker a lot. Then we've got Tien Shinhan, who was one of the mid-rivals of the original run, and a pivotal character for even a lot of Dragon Ball Z. We're going to be making Tien Bunny Rabbit from Sonic Sat.am. She's a trained, capable fighter with new techniques that Sonic has not encountered yet, like the ability to extend her metal limbs and fire projectiles from them. It will be a tough challenge, especially when she comes with her friend, Omochao, who takes the place of Chaozu in the original. Omochao is trained alongside Bunny in the arts of metallic fighting from their Crane School master, the old Zeti Zeke from the Deadly Six. Opposing Zeke, of course, would be the teacher to Sonic and Tails, who would train them in the martial arts and nurture their development. In the original, this was Master Roshi, but here, it's Grandpa Chuck, the elderly human man from Sonic X. He's old, he's wise, and he's maybe entered the late stages of dementia, which is where he starts picking up on some of Master Roshi's more quirky traits, we'll say. Whilst a small-time adversary in the big picture, Mercenary Tao was supposedly a deadly threat to Goku in the original. Here, we're going to have the mercenary played as Gamma, associated with the metallic fighting school led by Zeke, who fittingly is a deadly assassin robot armed with a precise laser cannon and able to fly mysteriously with a disconnected jetpack. But Goku encounters the Ox King during his journey, someone who will introduce him to a pivotal character. But the Ox King himself will be making King Acorn from Sonic Sat.am, and naturally his daughter, Chi-Chi, is going to be Princess Sally. Now, some people, and by some I mean basically all of you, are going to be upset that Chi-Chi isn't Amy, but it just wouldn't make sense. Sally is a princess, and Chi-Chi is a princess of the Ox King's whatever it is he rules. So that already is a connection there. But Sally is also very much a strict, dutiful individual. We see it throughout the comic run all the time, where she pushes her personal desires away time and time again to do what she believes is her role as the princess. And I felt like that translates well to the way that Chi-Chi in the future becomes very strict, principled, and by the book in the way she is involved with her family life and Gohan. So with all of those collecting moments, I felt like Chi-Chi should be Princess Sally. Of course, they're not the only classic Dragon Ball characters that play a big role in the story. Eventually, Goku needs to climb up a very tall tower to reach a floating lookout for specialized training, and he meets characters along this path. one of which is going to be Corin, a cat that awaits with a mystical water to improve your fighting capabilities. And in this scenario, we're going to make Corin Blaze the cat. Why? Well, they're both cats. I wanted to include Blaze, and I couldn't find anywhere else for her to go. But Blaze is someone who holds mysterious power, so I thought that she could fit the role fairly well, even if, unfortunately, it means she won't be in the main front lines. But assisting her would be the character of Yajirobe in the original, but instead will be Marine the raccoon, found often leeching off the generosity of Blaze in her domain. Once you arrive to the top, to the lookout, that's where we meet some more interesting characters. But in this turn of events, the lookout is not a nice pristine palace, but it is in fact Angel Island. And presiding over its rule is the wise Kami, or in this case, Pachacamac. The ancient Knuckles clan leader from Sonic Adventure's past is taking the role of Kami. And his opposite, the evil King Piccolo, is now going to be Locke, Knuckles' father from the Archie comics, who is rampaging on the world below once let loose. But Pachacamac doesn't rule Angel Island on his own. He has an assistant in the original, Mr. Popo. Here, Big the Cat. Why? Because they both hold unfathomable powers that they keep at bay for the sake of reality. With Locke as the evil Piccolo, who represents the final major bad guy in the original Dragon Ball, you might be wondering, who is his sire? When Sonic spin dashes through the chest of Locke, ending his life, in a final bid of extending his power, he releases an egg of his progeny to take revenge in the future. And when all the Sonic cast meet back at the last tournament of the Tenkaichi Budokai, they see that Sonic himself has grown up, whilst his friend Tails has remained rather short. But the final competitor he will face is none other than Piccolo Jr., or in this case, the Red Knuckles the Echidna, born from malice, but with a slightly different temperament to his father Locke. And with that brings us to the end of the original Dragon Ball run, leading us straight into the portion that's probably most known, where the Saiyan invasion begins. In the time from the transition between the original series and Dragon Ball Z, Sonic and Sally ended up having a child, a son by the name of Manic. Now, Manic is actually a character in certain stories from the Sonic Archie run, and so we are using him as a basis, though obviously slightly changed. He's a younger Sonic, he looks a bit goofier because he's not fully grown, but he's still a nice kid. And in this tale, instead of being deathly shy of everybody like Gohan was, who he will be replacing, he's instead more diplomatic in presentation, raised to be very reserved and formal at all times, especially when introducing oneself to strangers, thanks to the proceedings of his mother, Sally. And so Sonic will take his new son to meet some of his old friends, such as Amy or his old master, Chuck, over at their Kame house. But it's at this point where the invasion makes itself clear, as descending from the sky in search of Goku is Manic. The other Manic, the one that the child got his name from, in fact, from Sonic Underground, a groovier, sleeked up, punkish green hedgehog, calling himself Sonic's brother. But they don't call him Sonic. Instead, his brother announces it as such. "Hey man, I'm totally your brother from space. You're Maurice the Hedgehog." So that's right. To the hedgehogs, Sonic is known as Maurice. Then, much like in the original, Manic kidnaps, well, other Manic, and takes him away, saying that if Sonic doesn't agree to join him on his conquest in space, he'll just have to take his bratty son instead. And finding no other solution, Sonic ends up having to team up with his current rival, Knuckles, in a hope to stop this new invader from getting his way. And in their struggle to reclaim Manic from the other Manic's clutches, the young Sonic ends up getting enraged at the sounds of his father being beaten to death, and busts out of the capsule in which bigger Manic arrived in. Now, these capsules are not the Saiyan pods you'll recognize from the original Dragon Ball. Instead, these are fleshy, almost organic looking materials that can somehow move through space. Regardless though, Manic bursts out, and in a fit of rage, an underlying hidden power surges forth to his body, flashing in a darker surge of energy for just a moment, but it's long enough for him to boost straight into the chest of older Manic, knocking him far off his balance and giving our heroes the chance they need to take back the victory. Of course, just like in the original, Sonic is going to listen to the pleas of his brother, begging for safety in return to going home in peace, which turns out to be a lie. And so, Sonic has no other choice but to grab Manic in a full Nelson hold and allow Knuckles to punch one of his powerful fists straight through both of their chests, killing the both of them. And yet this sacrifice will be in vain, because in his dying breaths, Manic will chuckle that his comrades will certainly come to rescue him, collect these Chaos Emeralds that Knuckles boasted of so proudly, and resurrect him so that they can continue their fight. And flying somewhere in the deep space, in fleshy pods of their own, are in fact Manic's companions. But they do not care for the green punk, they just want the power of the emeralds to give themselves immortality. Instead of the Saiyan Prince Vegeta and his associate Nappa, we will have Shadow the Hedgehog and his associate, the Black Oak. Okay, so I'm going to explain this whole fleshy pod thing because it's clearly going to become a point of contention. In this tale of events, Shadow the Hedgehog, being the stand-in for Prince Vegeta, belongs to a race known as the Black Arms, and they're infamous in space for conquering planets, feeding off of all of its native life, and then leaving having had their full, and the planet that's left behind is able to be sold to the highest bidder. They spread like a plague through the spaces, but they are great frontline warriors, and they are led by their hive mind supreme leader, not King Vegeta, but instead Black Doom, on their home planetoid, the Black Comet, which streaks around wherever it's needed throughout the cosmos. And as such, legions of the Black Arms aliens are sent off as a certain space empire's main attacking force. And this is why, instead of Nappa, we have the Black Oak, one of the strongest specimens from the Black Arms. Shadow being their sired son, the special one. He is, in fact, a hybrid of the Black Arms and one of the races they subjugated, a planet of hedgehogs from which Manic and Sonic originated from. So that is why Manic is still an antagonist despite not being a Black Arms. It's not that he's from the same race, it's that his planet was subjugated and he was kept alive to be a useful tool. And whilst we're on the topic of the Black Arms, super minor character that really doesn't matter, but Vegeta actually has a brother called Tarball, and in this, Tarball will be replaced with Eclipse the Darkling, but again, it really doesn't matter overall. No, instead, let's go back to Sonic, who has been killed off by Knuckles and is now in the other world, but thankfully, Pachacamac manages to persuade King Yama, or should I say, the president from the Sonic OVA movie, to allow Sonic to not only keep his body in the afterlife, but travel in search of King Kai for training so that he may be returned by his friends through the wishes of the Dragon Ball and defend them from the coming threat. But King Kai is not who awaits for Sonic on his special planet at the end of Snake Way. Instead, it's going to be Tangle the Lemur from the IDW series. Why? Well, King Kai, apart from being a training figure, is also a bit of a jokester, and he likes to muck around and have fun. Tangle is someone who likes to muck around and have fun as well, and instead of using antenna to telepathically communicate to the mortals, her tail could act as an antenna, sticking up into the sky to communicate with others. So this is why I've ended up picking Tangle for the role. Nonetheless, Shadow and Black Oak will arrive on Earth and destroy large portions of cities until the heroes can confront them in a bid to protect the world. And during this fight, they will begin by unleashing these strange creatures, these small minions, to see if these Earthlings are even worth the fight. And instead of the plant-like Cybermen, it will be the Black Soldiers, crawling from the Earth, summoning the call of their masters. Thrown on the spot by releasing a capsule of small black leeches. And this fight will prove harrowing for the defenders. In fact, one of them will even commit suicide, detonating itself while gripping around Antoine, killing him in front of all of his friends. And this begins the conflict of Sonic and Shadow as they speed around at a race, the ultimate life form proclaiming he's the fastest in the universe. Well, you haven't seen me yet. As they dart between the peaks of the wasteland, Shadow gets frustrated that somehow Sonic the Hedgehog, Maurice, is actually keeping up with him. So he leaps into the air in a fit of fury, proclaiming that a lower being like yourself cannot hope to defeat the ultimate life form. I'm going to destroy this entire planet! And he charges up what is to be a powerful attack, drawing in the powers of the ancient light as he spins in the sky. He's going to boost into the ground with such impact it would be like a meteorite colliding into the planet. So Sonic, in turn, spins down below, collecting his own ancient light powers that he's used throughout his adventures past. And at the same time, they both unleash, at light speed, colliding with one another, Shadow from the sky and Sonic from the earth. The impact creates an invisible sphere of air pressure that detonates a dome beneath them in the ground, hollowing it out instantly. Wind and rocks lash out in all directions as they stay at a fixed point, neither one willing to budge. Sonic flinching as the pain starts overwhelming his receptors. Shadow can't help but grin, seeing another victory just in sight. And it's then that Sonic uses Tangle's training, Kaioken! Glowing red as a force of energy at the strain of his own body's fortitude allows him to overpower Shadow, first pushing him back, then sending him tumbling into the sky, far past the reaches of Sonic and the ground. Sonic crashes to the ground, bruised and beaten from his own attack, but smiling happily in victory as Tails and Manic come up to celebrate beside him. Of course, as we all know, that isn't the end, and Shadow will in fact return. Now, around this point is where Vegeta would create a false moon to become his great ape form, the Ozaru. But of course, Shadow the Hedgehog has no such ability. So instead, in a fit of rage, the fact he's even having to resort to this power against these lower life forms, Shadow will instead enter the Chaos Boost state as seen in Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06, as red chaotic energy emits from his body, enhancing his already impressive native powers. Shadow's Chaos Boost state does not have a glaring weakness in the same way the Great Ape did, where cutting off its tail would end the transformation. So instead, the unlikeliest of heroes emerges when the efforts of Tails and Manic failed to trick Shadow. And instead of a tail chopping off the transformation, it is the Yajirobe stand-in, Marine the Raccoon, who, darting between the rocks, creates a bubble of water around Shadow's head, long enough to suffocate him to the point of ending his Chaos Boost transformation, just as the Raccoon scatters back to safety. But then again, that was not enough to defeat Vegeta, and it's still not enough to defeat Shadow. Yes, he may be back to his base form, but with Sonic out the picture, it's still more than enough. However, Sonic was charging a special technique before, one that should be enough to destroy him once and for all. Instead of the Spirit Bomb, Sonic was taught the Kamehameha from Tangle, because of course, how could I not have the Kamehameha? And just like the Spirit Bomb, it's a move that draws on the life energy of those willing from the planet and can't hurt people of pure heart. But Sonic's body is too broken to use it, so his best friend Tails comes to his side and Sonic charges the energy into his hands, ensuring him he's got a good enough heart to do it. And so Tails will unleash the Kamehameha, and it will be deflected by his allies when he misses to try and destroy Shadow. Not everything's an upside in the fight, of course. It shouldn't go without saying that just like how Piccolo would give his life to protect Gohan, Knuckles will give his life to protect Manic. So how do they win this fight? Well, in the original, Gohan would look into the artificial moon Vegeta created, and in turn it would transform himself into a giant ape. That's not going to work here. So instead what happens is all the rage, all the sadness overcomes young Manic and unlocks a transformative state like we saw very early on against his fight against Older Manic. He unleashes a semi-dark transformation, but his mind is not his own. He's drawn only by anguish and fury. He lashes out, a threat to everybody, but he's able to be calmed down by the wise counsel of Tails and the sight of his still living father. But, unfortunately, the pressure was too much for his mentality, and he ends up falling unconscious, but not before unleashing a powerful torrent of dark energy that completely succumbs Shadow, crippling him to the point of no longer being able to fight. But, again, just like in the original, Sonic will selfishly ask Tails not to finish Shadow off as he crawls to his fleshy pod, and his reasoning being that he would really like to race that guy another time in the future. So Shadow, mocking this choice of foolishness, escapes, ending the Saiyan Saga portion of this tale. So what do you guys think of this so far? As I said at the beginning, I've not really done a franchise crossover style of video before, so I'm uncertain if I've hit the mark or not. Please do let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below, especially if you want to see more. I could have continued, but this video has gotten quite long very fast, so I decided this makes sense to stop at the end of the Saiyan arc. But if you did enjoy it, and you do let me know, we can keep going into the rest of the Dragon Ball series. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and share the video to help support it. And again, please do let me know your thoughts on this one. With that said and done, I hope you have a great day, and to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.